All right, hello Teletrim people. Let me just get to the live and not cover up my notes. There we go. Every time, there we go. Okay. Hello everyone, welcome to the Teletrim live stream today. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know, if this is your first time, I'm Dr. Gary Batman. I'm an Australian doctor over 18 years who comes from a math background, wound his way up in medicine, went through radiology to GP, and now into weight loss, because weight loss is where I saw there was a lot of room for to make a difference in patients' lives, mostly because early intervention and even small amounts of weight loss can help make big biological, metabolically healthy changes in a person. And I saw with the way that the health system is in Australia that consults were getting shorter and shorter and more rushed, or costing exorbitant amounts to have lots of time. And I thought there had to be a middle ground. How do we offer personalized care without it, costing an arm and a leg, cup of coffee a day, that kind of thing. And so that's where we're at. And the live stream is also just a way for patients to interact, ask questions. The private live stream that we do, patients as well, is another way just to ask questions and get further, just better treated care. I guess that's one of the things when I made my way into medicine, because another doctor sort of saw something in me. He's like, hey, you might be a good mathematician. Good Will Hunting. Matt Damon. Good Will Hunting. But he's like, you know what? You are very personable. And the way that you talk to your students and your lectures and the way you are, I think that's a really good fit for medicine. Why don't you come check it out? And long story short, here I'm in medicine. That's going back 20 plus years, even more. So again, in my time in GP, I guess one of the big things that I noticed was the patients who I felt had the best outcome, the patients that I had the strongest connections with, were the ones where I could take the time, develop a relationship, build trust, really did well, because they felt they could open up. There wasn't much judgment. Hopefully there was no judgment. No judgment. They could ask the embarrassing questions. They could trust my answers, or trust that if I didn't know the answer, I would be honest. But I would hunt to the ends of the earth to try to find that answer. I was just laying up at night. That's just to help prevent that. So I think taking those aspects of what myself and other like-minded doctors. That's why we all came together, and I'm just a co-founder of Teletrim. We wanted to offer more personalized medicine, and particularly weight loss, because now there's a lot more options than when I started medicine 20 years ago. I started as a doctor 20 years ago, and I think it makes it, a little easier to get on the journey. We also know a lot more about weight than we did 20 years ago. So, the actual journey itself is a little easier. We know the pitfalls to look out for. We know why things work and why things don't work. I think one of the big problems, and this is probably the one that helped kind of just force the issue for me, was that there's so much misinformation out there. There's influencers talking about other stuff. A good example was yesterday. Yesterday I did a weigh-in Wednesday. Hopefully everybody did their weight. Didn't get too many surprises. But I talked about several articles, and one of the things I purposefully did was kind of just skim the articles for you guys. Normally I like to give a bit more detail, but kind of skim those articles just to try to fit some in to have something to talk about. And in the private live stream today, one of the guys was like, yesterday, he's like, I didn't quite get everything you were saying. It was just so fast. And then that's when I looked at him and I said, what did you say? And he's like, Ah, gotcha. And that was the trick. Yesterday was about kind of showing how you can get information, but if it's just even a little bit rushed, you can miss or not even receive kind of what the big picture is, or what the purpose of it is, or that underlying little kernel of something. And so it was a good little trap yesterday for everyone, to see, just to kind of show that, just how much of a little difference rushing in a consult, rushing in a talk, can make. And we weren't in a hurry. I mean, I talked for like 45 minutes. You guys were begging me to shut up. At least hopefully you weren't. So I think it's just a good reminder that, finding someone who will slow down, take the time to explain, to let you understand, ask questions, is worth its weight in gold. It's worth its weight in your health. It's worth your life, because that's ultimately what we want to do with Teletrim. I think, seeing more and more and more patients, with them being rushed and not feeling heard, or being confused when they leave, or going out and Googling stuff, that just, it doesn't sit right. And the system is broken. There isn't enough money. There isn't enough time. There's not enough doctors for enough people. And so, trying to work out the very best. And that's why we do things differently at Teletrim. We want people to lose weight safely. We want to understand their body. We want them to understand their body. We want to understand habits and health, and then build a medical plan that fits them. And then we want to assess it. We want to keep checking it, make sure you're getting the results. We know that your body will adapt. We don't want to treat a number on the scale. We want to help you achieve the goal. And we always say weight loss is a lifelong journey. It's a chronic disease. Food is plentiful, where it wasn't evolutionarily. So we need to fight this battle for our whole life, and that's where we want to be here. We want to be here to help you medically, informationally. Hit up the stream, ask some questions. So I guess, what does Teletrim offer? I'll do that before then we'll move on to what I want to talk about today. Again, it's personal doctor-led weight management, and it's one-on-one consults, ideally with the same doctor, and that includes a comprehensive assessment, lab tests. We go over those results clearly, we communicate them well, and then we give you an ongoing plan that evolves as you do. And it's good. It's flexible, and we do it via telehealth, so it's easier for you to complete your journey, or not really complete it, because this is a lifelong journey, but easier for you to move along your journey. Fast lane. Which brings up, actually, that'll be the second one. The fast lane will be the second thing we'll talk about. There we go. How do you want time? So I guess one of the articles I think I might have briefly mentioned on yesterday that I wanted to come back to was, which was it? The Australian Journal? Let me go back up. It was from the American Journal of Public Health. There we go. So in the American Journal of Public Health, they had an article that was about the health at every size paradigm and obesity. And so what they want to do is come back and go, okay, look, from a public health perspective, from a macro kind of view, this obesity, weight loss is a public health problem. And if we kind of do that, let's look at all the data. And if they look at, we look at the weight loss phenomenon, the weight loss portion of what is, biologically being healthy. And they said, what? Sometimes losing weight, we put on weight. What if we took weight out of the picture? What if we said, hey, look, let's look at health at every size. So what they said is, let's look at a range of populations and look at what different sizes people can be, and what weight loss at these different sizes does, and what falls out. And again, the one thing that they did reinforce in this study was that obesity is a chronic disease. The effects on type 2 diabetes, hypertension, several cancers, gallbladders, coronary artery disease, stroke, those are all a given. Okay, so it's not like they're trying to discredit medicine or anything like that. They're trying to say, hey, look, those things are purposeful. How's the best way to attack these problems? Sorry about that. And I think part of it is it comes from, let's get away from the idea of looking specifically at weight, because what that does, if we just focus on weight, there's kind of you get a fear of fatness, or you get a social anxiety around it. And what we need to do is to sort of redirect how we, put our public health effort, how we put our efforts. And the way they did that is say, okay, well, some weight loss is obviously helpful, but we want things to be sustainable. We know that on average, if you're trying kind of a restrictive diet or trying things, that generally 30 to 40% of people will regain weight within 1 year. And in 2 to 5 years, not quite the remainder, but if not, the rest will kind of plateau up to that or get back up to that. So it goes, why, if weight is this number, and it's fluctuating, why do we keep focusing on it? Is there a way we can do something different? And basically what they said is, let's get people, instead of focusing on a number or something else, is let's come up with this idea of body acceptance. And now it's not saying, I'm big and I'm beautiful. We all are beautiful. You're all beautiful on the inside, but I'm not trying to say, morbid obesity, is going to be healthy. That's not what they're saying. What they're saying is, be a touch more realistic with what you want to achieve, and accept, what you're given and what you are. So, perhaps I should accept that I may never have a Brad Pitt Fight Club body. Why must you? No. But you know what? I can have a really healthy body that lets me play with the kids, live longer, live better, just get out and be active without too much of a struggle, and be, importantly, biologically healthy. So I can live longer, don't have strokes, don't have high blood pressure, don't have to take these medicines, They're saying, let's find somewhere amongst all the populations that people can accept these things. And let's kind of get rid of unhealthy eating. That's definitely one way, but let's just encourage, instead of trying to be an elite athlete and, do 10,000 CrossFit push-ups, press-ups, whatever it is, to just be active. Don't be elite, be active. You don't have to go run marathons every day. I always talk about my old man and telling him, if you're going to watch NCIS, get up and walk back and forth across the room. 45 minutes, maybe get to the other side, have a little drink, get to the other side, just keep going. Small little active things like that, little tricks that are just going to go. I don't know, my kids keep trying to encourage me to, every time we watch TV, to do 100 push-ups. And I'm like, I can't do 100 push-ups all at once. I don't know if I can do it throughout the day, but it does add up. I do not do 100 push-ups in front of the television, by the way. Maybe 10 on a good day. So again, the idea is that a healthy lifestyle is much more sustainable and biologically well. Again, there does need to be some weight loss. So there is a window, again, to bring down the risk from chronic disease of obesity and fat. But again, we talked about the other day in our talks about 5 to 15% weight loss is what you need to achieve a huge metabolic improvement, biological improvement. So I think the big message from this article was that traditional things, traditional diets and weight loss, they kind of lead to some false hope for some people who are going to hit these regains, or they have the wrong image in their head. And so what we need to do is sort of retrain ourselves so that we don't fail, because if we do try and fail, that leads to shame and whatever. So don't try to be an elite performer. Try to be just a better version of you. Doesn't have to be the best, just better. Okay. So I guess that the question sort of along this would be, and what they brought up in the paper would be more like, what if weight guidelines don't fit real life? We talked about they don't. Brad Pitt. When standard guidelines miss the person that they're trying to treat. And this is sort of the tension between policy and patient care, because you're trying to meet these numbers, but you're also kind of missing the patient. So I think that's kind of important to think about, and that's why they're taking this more macro public health. And again, that weight-focused care can overlook important factors like the psychological, and even, at times maybe even lead to just more unhealthiness. And I guess a good takeaway is what they're trying to say is, that your health is not shaped by numbers alone. It's not shaped by weight alone. It's all your biology happening. It's just a healthier lifestyle, some weight loss. So we have a question. How do you use guidelines without losing sight of a patient's individual circumstances? By keeping it real. No, sorry. I think the biggest thing is that, guidelines are just that. They're a guide. It's like my kids and rules. There's the rules. There's a little bit of flex. You don't break the rules. The guidelines are the same. They're kind of a set of rules for the standard person. And what you have to go is, where do you fit in this standard person thing? Am I, I might be a little bit out. Let's try to bring it back. And I think that's where it's important to have medical input. Things about your diet, your biology, your bloods, what is actually happening in there. And I think when you can take all these extra things and you have someone like a medical professionals to collect all the pieces of the puzzle and put it together, then that lets you take into account the circumstances to, move forward. And so I think the real thing is just, without losing sight, is that the time, just taking time to talk to a patient and go, I want you to do 100 push-ups in front of the TV. Well, that's not really realistic because I don't have a TV. I'm like, oh, what, you don't have a TV? No. Or, walk back and forth across the room. I got no legs. You got to be realistic. Or, trying to get someone to really restrict when, they're having low blood sugars or hypos or something. Or, I think the real thing is just every patient is unique. Their problem isn't unique, but they are unique. And I think it's really just working with that patient with personal care to tease out the right thing. And again, the guidelines are just a flex. So to long answer your question, hopefully that answered it. Yeah. Good. All right, one of the articles I talked about yesterday that kind of gained a little bit of traction was excessive weight loss. And basically, this was talking about the risks associated with excessive weight loss. And, what do we mean by excessive weight loss? Well, we talk about, again, losing 5 to 15, even 5 to 10% weight is good. That can improve your glycemic control, can improve your blood pressure, and can lower your triglycerides or cholesterol. So, even just that small of a weight loss, 3 to 6 kilos, right? No matter your size, 3 to 6 kilos, it can be enough to do all of that. So where does things go wrong when you lose weight? And for this, it goes, look, that 5 to 10%, 5 to 15%, we're not talking you have to lose it in a week, in 2 weeks. We're talking 6 months, and we see these results. Where things get wrong is when you get to 20% weight loss. And we're not saying, hey, you can't lose 20% ever. It's just do it gradually, do it in time. Even that same 5 to 10%, if you chunk off a ton of weight right away, there's going to be ramifications. So this is an important thing. Sorry, somebody asked, what signs tell you if weight loss is becoming unsafe rather than helpful? Look, the things that really tell you it's unsafe, and I'll mention it in some specific diets, is if you're getting dizziness or you're getting really fatigued, You're breaking bones easier. Hopefully you're not breaking any bones. Sometimes kidney stones can be a sign if you're losing a lot of weight, kidney stones. So scurvy, your gums are receding, your gums are bleeding, you look like a pirate. Maybe you're just losing teeth like a pirate. Those can be some signs that it's becoming unsafe. So I guess the article was good because it talked about a bunch of different diets that we see out there. And, look, ultimately our goal is to lose weight and, to do it safely and sustainably and for the long term, keep it off. That's our journey. That's where Teletrim's here to help. It's where you are trying to help. That's where you're trying to get to. And there's different options. There's restrictive diets, medications, surgeries, and what these do is all of this together is sort of kind of in the we're going to achieve a desired weight loss. We want to lose X amount of kilos. We want to do whatever, and that can be done this way. And then you have your fad diets, like I only eat certain macros. I only eat vegan plus. God knows I only eat orange food. Something like that. So I think you can kind of see where it started the nutritional deficiencies come. And that's where they talk about in this is, with the onset of a lot of surgeries like gastric sleeves or, medications, there's a real chance for losing lots of weight quick. And doctors particularly need to be on the lookout for this because these things are on the rise. They're useful tools, okay? They're not, the intent of these things isn't for people to be harmed, it's for them to lose weight. And so this is really just more of not a stop sign, it's more of a just slow down or, doctor crossing, patient crossing, doctor crossing. So they kind of spun out a couple of the diets and just said, hey, look, if you got a person who's on the ketogenic diet, so that's kind of like a really low carb diet, they're going to have some vitamin deficiencies. And so they're going to have things potentially like low magnesium, low calcium, low iron, what else? Low phosphate, low potassium. And because they've got all that, the other things is they're going to be at an increased risk for kidney stones. Atkins, which is similar to the low carb, but with extra fat and meats, you can wind up missing out on some folate or vitamin C, scurvy, some thiamine, so your brain, you might be a bit more wobbly. Paleo, you miss out on a lot of calcium. Vegan, missing out on your zinc, your iron, B12, your calcium, all the things we get from animal proteins, and that can make you anemic or, you get dizzy, fatigue, and also it can hurt your bone density. So again, the big thing about sort of excessive weight loss is when you do it fast or a lot, generally pretty fast, but a lot, you have to make sure that your medical professional is looking out for these vitamin nutritional deficiencies because they're going to have ramifications. I guess one of the other things they kind of talked about in there is, we talk about, you hear about weight loss, we talk about, metabolic adaptation, I lose weight and my body adapts. So, and we briefly touched on an article, which I'll touch on again tomorrow, where that metabolic adaptation might be a little bit more overblown than we thought. And I guess a good example would be is, we're at our current weight, we need, let's say, 2,500 calories, X amount of energy, and we've lost this much weight. So by the calculations, we should, to stay at this weight or be this weight, we need 2,200 calories. But in reality, when they measure it in the lab, people are just doing fine at 2,000. So they're like, well, they're still holding on to this weight, but there's less calories. What's going on? And so they're talking about, has the body adapted? So maybe we've been blowing this out of proportion. And that's what they were kind of reinforcing here is, with that metabolic adaptation, we know that there's going to be some weight swings here and there, but if you lose excessive weight and rapidly, that really this is going to come into play because you can't really maintain stuff that's rapid for a long time because the body will fight you back. But it will not necessarily slow down, because that was what I'm trying to say is it's not, your metabolism's not slowing down. It's just recentering to what your body is, your ideal body weight is at your body weight. And, again, if you go from needing 2,500 to needing 2,000 and, you're eating, say 1,000, make the math easy, 15, that extremeness just feels slow because you're not getting those big things. So again, the body adapts, but it adapts in a way to go, your medical person needs to be aware of that. But with this rapid weight loss, the metabolic changes you're seeing isn't just fat loss. You can only carve out an iceberg so much before you're like only at a certain rate to get to the core. So you have to use other things. And losing weight fast, you're losing muscle because you're using that as an energy source. You're losing bone because a lot of the restrictions, you're not getting calcium. So you wind up becoming deficient or kind of losing what you started with. And you just have to be aware, take it easy, just fine. The last sort of thing they touched on is, again, with this excessive weight loss and that stuff, the restrictions, the things that you do, I guess even surgical, there's risks for surgery, there's risks of gastric dumping and, things going fast. But in the end, there's really big psychological effects, and there can even be death if you're not careful. So I guess the takeaway is lose weight, lose it a little bit at a time, lose it responsibly, and just liaise with your medical professional. If it's not us, that's fine, it's someone else, okay? So I guess the short takeaways from this are gonna be faster isn't always safer, okay? And rapid weight loss, it comes with trade-offs. Usually it's nutritional, and those have knock-ons like anemia. And the body does respond to speed. If you lose weight fast, it's gonna notice, and it's gonna shift, and it's gonna say, okay, let's try to hold on to a little bit, and then let's try to see what we can do. And I guess a good thing about this as well is that if we take our time, if we go slow, we go, you know what? Not all weight loss timelines are equal, because we don't want to get to here, and have problems. And, if we go to hospital and we get laid up, then we can't, exercise or eat our specific diet or whatever it is that we're trying to do to lose weight. And then we pack it all back on. That's just going to be, not good. So I think, adjust your timeline appropriate. Talk with your doctor, talk with yourself. This is where caution matters. Why are lifestyle factors like sleep, stress, and mental health so often overlooked? I think because of the world we live in. We all need money. We've got to pay rent. Got to, we got to put food on the table. We got to do that, and so you need money, which means we need work, and work can be stressful, and there's never enough. Oh, maybe for some, but there's usually never enough money. So that's can be stressful. And sleep, well, I need to make more money, so the thing that's going to trade is sleep. And where do I work out? Oh, I'm going to trade that for sleep. Where do I trade that for work? I'm going to trade that. So I think it's one of those things that people sort of innately just, I won't use the word accept, but they're just kind of, they're those puzzle pieces that are kind of stuck, and you have to try to figure out how we do it. And so it gets overlooked because you go, look, these are immovable forces. And I think a lot of times in medicine, what you find is when you do talk it out with someone, and unfortunately, a lot of times it's like, oh, I had my first heart attack, and then I made all these changes. Why didn't I make them sooner? I'm like, well, we told you to, But again, sometimes it's just not logistically possible. But I think when you do form that deeper connection, when you do have someone, again, showing you the data, doing the numbers, giving you a chance to ask those questions on your time, it can help it not be overlooked. But and mental health is just, I think we're all a little crazy. No, I think mental health, I think it's tough for everyone, and I think a lot of us don't want to appear weak. We don't like the shame. We just, I think it's one of those things that just, until you trust someone, you don't really want to open up about it. And that's why I think it's good to have personal care. All right, one last one. Why is weight treated as an isolated issue instead of part of the overall health? I think because weight is so complex. that, you go, well, like that article said, everyone focuses on the number, or a BMI, your weight and a number. And so they go, you need to be this so that you can be that. And that's how it should happen. And I think, now we've learned so much more about, visceral fat and hormones. And now we have more tools in our arsenal to fight weight and metabolic disease and health, that it's become complex enough to kind of be its own little special niche that can be done really well. And I think, again, like the article was saying, I think as long as we can readjust our attitudes, then we go, okay, let's get to a spot where, we can succeed, we can be healthy, and then, start a new journey. You do want to look like Brad Pitt, get to healthy, get a different journey, get a timeline that's a safe timeline. Be cautious. Yeah, I mean, look, the evidence shows that very rapid or excessive weight loss may increase health risks, and especially in older adults or those with, existing conditions. So, we don't want the physical stress. We don't want the nutritional deficiencies. We don't want people to die. Faster weight loss isn't always better. And I think weight gets isolated because it's just viewed as a number, and it's something that you can solve, A to B. However faster we get there is the faster we're going to get results. And it's turning out to not be the case. All right, I've got to run today, guys. We'll be back tomorrow. Some Friday food swaps. Talk a little bit more about a few articles and a little more about me, I guess. So yeah, again, come ask your questions. And if not, we'll see you in the private live stream.